Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Currency Podcast, or if you will, or if you want, just Currency Podcast. That's the one. That's the podcast that it is. That's the one you arrived at. Did you know by the title? And like you needed me to also reiterate it. This is episode 105. I'm continuing my PGA Tour career, and in case you didn't hear the last episode, I was laying out what my plan of attack is here. I said that the rules that I'm laying out for myself, are that I have to win a major on the PGA Tour in this career mode, where right now I haven't even graduated to the PGA Tour. I'm still on the Korn Ferry Tour, but until I make it onto the PGA Tour, win a major, at that point, I will give myself the ability to buy the newest PGA Tour game in real life, which came out in October. It might have already come out. It's like PGA Tour 2K23 with Tiger Woods on the cover. New golf video game. They don't make new ones all the time, but I'm continuing my career mode. And so if you tune into the video, you can see me play this golf video game, and it'll be like watching someone play Golden Tee or something, obviously, since that's what the Golden Tee is for golf too. But what else did I want to mention? Well, I'll just start playing. As if you caught me by surprise, as if I wasn't waiting to start this at the moment that I wanted. Like, oh, there's something I needed to say here when I do the whole thing. But I'm gonna just use the audio from my microphone because the audio from this Twitch stream isn't cutting it. The Twitch stream cuts out and shit like that, so I can't even just slap the audio over the Twitch stream because the Twitch stream glitches, and then I have to edit the audio even off of my microphone. But yes, so the Currency Podcast is mostly about me explaining technical issues, and it's just like, this is in news and notes. This is the morning announcements for the sermon you're about to hear. I hope that you're fucking locked in for this sermon, and it is kind of like it's almost like I give an anti-sermon or something. That's kind of what I do. I do anti-sermons on the Currency Podcast. Don't really know why, but I noticed in the last episode that I remember I said, I don't want to bash Christianity, but then I spent the entire episode bashing Paul Christ, who is like Christianity with a Y would be Christianity. Like, Paul Christ wasn't around long enough to form his own religion or get people on board with Christianity with a Y. And I think that's for the best, but the Badgers, I think you're just inviting something. Let me make sure the headset is on. Let me turn this down on the TV, obviously. I think you're inviting curses on yourself or magic or something when you hire a head coach whose last name is Christ. Like, maybe that shouldn't be overlooked. Like, if you fire him without justifiable cause, it might come back to haunt you. Like, you might have the curse of Christ on your hands or something like that. Not that by comparison, like, you might disagree with the analogy because Jesus Christ didn't bring a curse on anybody, but in some senses it's like killing the guy who never sinned, like completely innocent. Humanity has never overcome Jesus Christ in the aftermath of that, killing a completely innocent guy. It's almost like we brought the curse of Christ on ourselves because he's still with us today. Like, oh, we shouldn't have done that. Like, it's a punishment for humanity. Not that, most people don't see it as a punishment, but here on the Currency Podcast, we only deal in evil and viewing Christ as a negative, as it turns out. It's not really what I intended. But sometimes Sometimes that's just how it happens. Well, this is an interesting hole. What do we got going on here? Where's the hole? It's down there. So I'll try to complete about 9 holes. I'm in the 5th tournament of 6 on the Corn Ferry Tour. And if you do happen to watch the Twitch stream, it will cut out, but I'm just going to talk through it because I'm using the audio on my microphone that is outside of the microphone on my headset. But no point in trying to explain. I mean, it's just not really entertaining, even though I keep trying to explain it. Definitely gonna go down here with my 3-wood, but that'll be difficult because there's a fucking tree in the way. No, we're gonna have to go 5-wood. And so the Badgers fired Paul Christ a day after I released my podcast episode about the Badgers football team and their status. And it was probably because I roasted him on Twitter and made that podcast episode that they fired him. It was probably me, and they're like, wow, they knew that I was upset about it. And so we're like, this can't go on any longer. We need to fire Paul Christ. I mean, I was talking to the front office of the Badgers as this was happening behind the scenes. I didn't let anybody know about that. I'm an inside guy, and I kind of whispered to them a little bit. I'm like, hey, this is serious. You really need to fire Paul Christ. And they did. But just establishing that I did release that episode after they lost to Illinois and before they fired Chris the next day. And so the question is, should they have fired him? Was it too soon? There's this analyst that is pretty prominent. His name is Joel Klatt, and he was talking about that the Badgers shouldn't have fired him, maybe, because be careful for what you wish for, Wisconsin. But he's dead wrong, because it's more like the Badgers can't go wrong firing Christ because their organization is good enough that it kind of doesn't matter who they put in at the top. It might actually be the case that the thing they needed the most was a change at the top. I would argue that is the case, and that Chris hinders them from winning any single game. Wisconsin won yesterday in a blowout win over Northwestern in the first game after Chris being fired, and I think that is exactly a sign of what you can expect with him gone. Like, you don't have to worry about them getting into a dogfight with Northwestern anymore because you don't have the panicky leadership of Paul Christ, who can sort of lose you any single game somehow. It's great that he's gone. I'm very glad that they fired him. I have no regrets in the comments I've made. If Wisconsin goes undefeated the rest of the year, that isn't to say that Christ made a great team and they should have fired him too soon. If they go undefeated the rest of the year, that is a sign exactly of that they made the right decision in firing him, because the Badgers are good with or without him, and it's like he's losing them games that they have no business losing, that it's like the Badgers could win if Christ wasn't in the way. And so I don't really think that there's any curse of Christ to worry about, because I think the Badgers can only do better with him gone, and they're like, it's smooth sailing from here on out. But I'll get off of talking college football in a minute, but in case you do like college football, the broadcasters' treatment of the referees so far this season has been a complete joke. The broadcasters for the 2022 season in both college football and the NFL have reignited their passion for the referees. They love them so much all of a sudden, like even more so than in years past. The producers on all major networks are in the ears of the broadcasters, telling them that we are going full force with your excitement and agreement towards the referees. We're going full force propagandizing the referees, so the broadcasters, their hands are tied about saying anything negative. The referees have done nothing wrong the entire season, according to the way it's broadcasted. It's really like, I don't know that I even tune into a football game to watch the games. I just want to see the refs so much. That's the way that the broadcasters talk about them, is that the refs are so good at their job. It's just a joy to watch the refs throw flags. Like, that's my takeaway from watching football so far this season, is that I don't need to see a 40-yard diving catch so much as I need to see it taken away by a holding penalty that didn't happen. Like, that's the joy for me. Like, watching a football game is kind of more about, it's kind of like watching a NASCAR race. You watch it just for the crash. Like, that's the most exciting part. That's how I feel about football games now this season, is that I'm barely watching for the game. I just like to watch the referees throw the flags. That's what's most entertaining. Why even watch the game when the referees are so good at their job? They're so good at what they do. Like, it's amazing. They're good every time. They're so professional. I don't need to see any plays. Every single punt return that gets returned more than 20 yards, there is a penalty that didn't happen. And just watching the refs throw those flags and how good they are at it, no matter what, and that they're never wrong and they're God's gift to earth, forever throwing a flag or making a decision, like, they're so right, that it's amazing just to watch them do their job. I don't give a fuck about what happens for the football players. They're not the stars anymore, as far as I can tell. The referees are the stars. I mean, they are Jesus Christ, every single one of them. And it's just a gift that they might throw one flag, let alone 30 in a game. So it's just praise God for these God's gift to earth referees, for all that they do. Like, I miss when the football season wasn't done. We didn't get to see the referees do their thing. Yeah, so let me take this podcast in a different direction. So people don't like to hear negativity and sarcasm just in general. It kind of puts them on edge. But if you've heard this podcast, you know how sarcastic that I am. Oh, wow. I am like, I must be in a really negative mood right now. I don't know how to turn it around. It's like watching all this football and watching the broadcasters put their dicks as far up every referee's ass as they can, just to see how much they can make the referees climax. It really deters me. It really puts me in a bad mood. So referees are really sexy and really lit and really good at their jobs, and it's just kind of a party on the field whenever the refs are there, whenever the refs are showing themselves more, stopping the game, stopping the momentum and the energy of the game just to show themselves for a minute. Like, who needs a 50-yard passing play? Yes, I'm sorry for this negativity. I was thinking about how... Who cares what I'm thinking about? Let me just be nice for a minute and not get angry at the referees, so that people will know that I'm on their side. Let me help myself out. I live in Columbus, Ohio. Let me tell you a little about myself. Let's just take it down a few notches. I'm getting scared with the rhetoric that I'm putting out. I'm making myself nervous. I live in Columbus, Ohio. I do a little stand-up in Columbus, Ohio, probably once a week. I'm trying to make it twice a week, but it is consistently once a week. It's like the comedy scene in Columbus is... I think it's good. Like, it's active. There's a lot of places you can do open mics, and that's important. I think that it's a positive enough atmosphere for people starting out because there's so many different open mics. Like, there's enough venues in Columbus that you can't complain about the venue or the crowds. there's like you could go somewhere else if you don't like one place. And I was watching the Impulsive podcast, and Dane Cook was on it in the episode I was watching, and he mentioned something that I thought was really interesting that I've been thinking about ever since I heard it. He said that where you don't show up says just as much about you as where you do show up. And I had never heard that before. That's an important idea to consider. What he's saying is that you can personalize yourself, or in other words, customize yourself or characterize yourself to other people just by where you don't show up. Like, it's not always important to be every single place to like in order to be productive or accomplish things. You can be productive by not showing up to places. Like, it's not always a good idea just to do something every time just for the sake of appearing, because it's kind of like, if you really want to talk about the real world and what makes you real, what makes you real is just appearing, making appearances lots of places, because the more that you appear, the more that you are real to the rest of the world, because the more they can observe you and see you. If we're talking about real, like what actually makes you real, it means gaining authority, or devoting time to an area of specialty. But it could be being an electrician is having a career as that. You keep showing up to work as an electrician, you become that more and more. Devote yourself to that area of specialty. You become real only as a result of appearing as that very many times. Like, electrician is a good example, especially because it's one where you do have to show up. It gets more ambiguous where people like work from home, and I've mentioned that a couple times. It's kind of like the standards of real it's becoming more of a gray area the more that you can become real just from staying in your house. But even for things you stay in your house, you do have to make appearances like online, but whatever. What I'm saying is that I feel as though winning as a thing, what we call winning, is kind of all about appearances, because the winner is the one that appears the most, or the one that appears. Like, the winner of the Super Bowl is the team that made the most appearances, that they were the best at appearing. Winning has a lot to do with appearances. Gaining authority has a lot to do with, it's just like gaining authority is what makes you a winner. You only do that by becoming real, appearing as something. But what's bizarre is just that the world of the real and the fake, it's kind of like what we do to become real is actually it's actually faking it. It's almost to the point that, like, the thing that we call being real, where I'm saying the thing we call being real is like gaining authority, appearing as things, but especially in terms of a speciality, especially as one special thing, one specific thing, and that makes you real. But it's like appearing as one specific thing over and over is the same thing as faking it, and it's almost to the point that we should call it faking it, because it's fake that a person would pose as an electrician, or a plumber or anything. It's actually fake because the person wasn't a plumber to begin with. They're not that in real life, and they're not that most of the time. Most of the time they go home and they aren't posing as that. They don't have to dress up as it in accordance with the standards of their job. And you have to wear the costume or the uniform in accordance with the rules of the area or the territory of specialty that you're trying to gain authority in. You have to wear the thing along with the rules. That's what makes you that. That's what characterizes you as that, is wearing the clothes along with performing the actions consistent with whatever profession or thing you're trying to specialize in that makes you that. But it's fake. It's fake that somebody is pretending to be an electrician because they're just a person, but it's like you're just entering into this specific world where you're like, I am an electrician, but it's like it's almost like a joke you're pulling over on yourself. Now, like with the electrician, that's just a job that people would typically be like, the only reason I'm here is to make money. Like that's not a want, and that's not for fun. But that's not to take away from that pretending to be that. You're still pretending to be it, even if it's something you're like, I don't desire to pretend to do this. Like, it's not like the person who is an electrician is really excited about being identified to being an electrician for however long they do it. I wonder if the headset got reassigned. Doesn't matter a lot, but what am I saying? I'm saying that we, like, faking it is what makes you real typically, but it's just kind of weird how much winning is about appearing as something. Only if you put in the work to appear, yada yada yada. Oh wow, I keep trying to get it up onto the screen, but I'm not really motivated as much. Since I won a tournament, I'm actually third in the standings in my career mode, and so I'm endlessly thrilled with my efforts for doing that. I'm endlessly excited with my accomplishments in that area. But I'm just thinking about how this is an anti-sermon that you're going to get to hear, but it's kind of like Jesus Christ is the God of, he's the God of rising from the dead, and it's comparable to like Poseidon is the God of the sea. But back in the day, but people actually believed in Poseidon back then, and they called him the god of the sea. But there's something interesting about the idea of God, and it has a lot to do with time. Pretty much any time that you're referencing God, I would say, whether it be the biblical God or Polynesian gods. What I mean to say is Hindu gods, but Polynesian gods. I'm thinking Polynesia because there's so many there's so many islands that are collected under the name Polynesia. That reminds me of Hinduism, where there's so many gods collected under Hinduism. Very, very disintegrated gods, because you get disintegrated gods and you get integrated gods, and yeah, I just wish I could figure out what I was starting to say when I was talking about real versus fake. It's just like, I think that we're confused about real versus fake, and there should be more credit given to that pretending to be an electrician, and then we credit them as like, that's what makes you that. That's what makes you real. Being real has a lot to do with pretending. Like, it's important to be, you have to be pretentious, which is kind of a word for, which is basically being pretendish. But notice that there's no adjective for pretending, like in that way. If you are, I was being pretend, I don't think there is one, unless you said pretendish. Though our word for that is pretentious. And I think we lose sight of that, or people don't often mention pretentious is just for pretending. But if it's something like stand-up comedy, you actually have to be pretentious. You have to pretend that you're worthy of going up on the stage, because anybody in the room could go up on a stage, especially if it's an open mic. But what you do is try to convince everyone by pretending that you're the one worthy of speaking. So that, like, in that area, whatever, I don't need to prove anything to you today. I need to prove that I can bring out points. I'm just trying to say something considerable. Like, the bar should not be that high. It's not like I'm going to break the bank here with whatever I say. I'm just saying some things, but I have a more interesting point about Poseidon than this whatever I'm talking about, real versus fake, which is that you're going to want to stick around for it as I follow this point through. It's like back in the day, and I don't know which ones are Greek gods and which ones are Roman gods, so I'm just going to say like Greek gods, like Poseidon. Today Poseidon is a Greek god, even if he was a Roman one. That's what I'm telling you. Just for today, all gods are Greek gods. Just the way that God intended it. But what I was going to say is that God has a lot to do with time. In any culture or religion that you're referencing God, I think that you're referencing, it's really closely related to time, just characteristically speaking. Oh yeah, but what I was saying was, it's weird how you can characterize yourself just by places you don't show up. Like, it's almost like that makes you real. Even though being real should be about appearing. But more importantly, if you're concerned with personalizing yourself, not everybody is. Like, a lot of people want to join a collective. A lot of people are on the side of socialism and therefore don't like individualism. And individuals who say that they get to decide outside of standardized knowledge, or, for example, standardized medicine. Like people who say, I'm not going to take a vaccine just because personally I think so, even though they aren't doctors. The collectivist world hates those people, and this comes through in the media, especially the mainstream media, but mainstream media is already integrated media as opposed to disintegrated. So mainstream media is already the voice of collectives, but liberals like collectives. They're more socialist than conservatives. Conservatives more for individualism and for narcissists and people that say that they can choose shit on their own. But so you might be, if you like characterizing yourself or personalizing the way you appear, and I'm saying stylizing it, like if you like to have your own style, it's just interesting you can stylize yourself just by places you don't show up, because that is the case. Like if I only go to certain venues to do stand-up, but then it's like people know about me that he always goes here and doesn't go here. That's just style. That's like, my style is that I appear in certain venues that look like this and sound like this, or like I want to make myself appear in certain places. Like the way you choose to appear to other people is how you stylize yourself. And I would argue that not choosing to not go places adds to your style just as much as choosing to go to it, or like at least it almost does. But that's what's significant or interesting about it to me, is that it's almost like not choosing to not go there adds to your style just as much as choosing to go there. Or it's the same with what you wear. What you choose to not wear says just as much about you. Like not involving yourself in the thing. And so I personally had never really thought of it like that. Get in, get in. Oh, wow, I made that long birdie. Long birdie right there. So, but what I'm saying about Poseidon is a point that I'm going to link to the myth of Santa Claus in just a minute. But because the more interesting I wanted to say is a thing I wanted to say is about Santa, which I've talked about Santa on here a few times in the past, but not everybody has heard all of my episodes. But it doesn't matter because it's gonna get brought up again anyway. I'm going to mention it again. It's just kind of weird that we have this myth about Santa Claus where we make a person out of the North Pole. Or in other words, the North Pole is like a geographical location, but yet we've personalized the North Pole. We've made it into a person. We've made it into a god. It's the same way we make lots of things into gods. But it's like you have Poseidon, the god of the sea. And back when people believed in Poseidon, they didn't believe in him because he was stupid, because people were stupid necessarily. It's because they didn't have enough information. It's more like Poseidon or Aphrodite, I believe, is a god of love, or of maybe she's just the god of womanhood. I don't remember. Well, Venus is a god of love, right? Whichever one is the god of love, like you have the god of love and the god of the sea. The reason that they had those gods is because they needed them. That was a technology that they were using to get ahead, because that's a technology that people needed because humans had not yet mapped out the sea. But it's like at the time that they believed in Poseidon, the god of the sea, humans hadn't mapped out the parameters of the seas across the world. Like Greece, as far as they knew like where the Mediterranean Sea ended probably, but they obviously hadn't traveled the oceans. Like the sea existed in this really undefinable area to humans at the time, since they didn't know what was at the end of the sea. And because of that, you have something like the god of the sea. But I would say it's the same with the god of love. I think at that time, it's like before recent human history, we probably weren't approaching or processing love at the rate that we do today. But like the 60s happened, and a lot of push in American culture, where American culture really originates pop culture for the rest of the world. The overemphasis on love in American culture in recent memory, like in the past century, has done a lot to break down our relationship to love as humans. And I'd say that before humans are able to approach the idea of love in full force, which I'm arguing we've been able to do more recently, and we do that by saturating the market with works of art about love, like movies and TV shows and songs, which there's been a ton of those in the last 50 years. We were processing love and how great it is to us, and we find it to be amazing, which is like, it's something we need to do as humans in our entire journey through humanity. But I'd say that it's like today we worship love, but 2,000 years ago, when we needed a god for just love itself, just for that idea, back then they were worshiping a god of love because they're still distant from love as an idea. They're more superstitious about it. Like today we just worship love. We used to worship a god of love, or like before a lot of these works of art about love came along, we needed to distance ourselves from that idea as something we didn't understand. It was more undefinable to humans. But it's like, this is what happens anytime that you have an area that is unknown to humans. It's like they make a god about it because humans don't see themselves to be God over that area. And I would argue that that is what was happening with love. But it's like humans didn't allow themselves to be intelligent enough to say, like, we can just process and approach the ideas themselves, I'd say that you know that they felt distant from love by the fact that they're outsourcing it to this guy that they think is so far above them, like a god of love. But they did that for everything. But it's like they had the god of the sea because technology hadn't developed where we mapped all of the seas, and then we have more control over the weather to be and radar and things like that allows now we know when a storm is coming. And so humans' relationship to the sea used to be this, like, we didn't know about it, we didn't control anything about it. That's why we had things like Poseidon, and I am talking circa whenever Poseidon was relevant. But like, Poseidon was relevant and people were worshiping him 2,400 years ago because they needed to, because people weren't God over the sea. But at the point that technology allows humans to have control over all seas of the world, which we have so much more control over the sea now than we did 2,000 years ago, because of that, it's impossible for Poseidon to be relevant today because people just worship the sea. They don't worship the god of the sea. And by worship the sea, I mean, like, people can interact with it at so much higher a level than they used to, and approach it and gain intel and insight and information, data points, perceptions on the sea. We're there all the time. We're kind of, I mean, we're in and among the sea is how much we can cross the sea whenever we want. We made the sea our bitch. It's because, like, humans are over the sea. Humans are god of the sea now. That's why we don't need a god of the sea. It's because we saw ourselves to be God in that area. And I would argue that this doesn't just happen for, like, the god of love or the god of the sea. This is every place that we're saying there's a god in that area. I think that God as a word is used for this very purpose. It is a technology that people use in place of an unknown area of human life. It's like when you don't have the technology, you have to use God as a technology in lieu of technology that will eventually allow humans to figure it out. But I'd say that we have Jesus for the same reasons. Like, Jesus is a God that's very relevant today. He's the Son of God, according to the people that worship him the most. But basically, Jesus is the God of rising from the dead because that's what is most significant about him. That's why you worship him, is because he's the only human, the only person that we respect to be a person that we also respect to have risen from the dead. He's the only human in human history that's done this, that anybody in the world is convinced rose from the dead. And so he's half human, half God, but he's the only human we think rose from the dead. And so humans, as a result, just kind of inevitably have to worship him as having power over death, because no other human is able to do that. And even today, we have no technology that allows us to defeat death. And what I'm saying is that it's just things haven't developed in time where we have come up with technology that prolongs our life so much that we have power over death. But that could be more complex than what somebody would think about it on the surface. What causes you to have power over death? Like, there's a lot of different technologies that allow for this. Like, I don't know if you heard about that story about Dana White, where he said he figured out from somebody that he has just over 10 years to live because there's this doctor somewhere who will give you the day that you're going to die. And allegedly, he's able to predict it within a month because all that he does is take your blood, he does some blood work, and then he takes your DNA, and then he runs a couple tests, this doctor, and then he figures out when you're going to die, and allegedly this doctor is accurate to within a month of your death just by him taking your blood and your DNA. But things like this, like if technology advances enough, we might have power over death in areas like this. But the risk, or the thing that science is always threatening, is that we already live in the age where we're going to have humans that live super long lives, like 300 years, but like the person who will never die has already been born or whatever. Like science is threatening this because of the exponential rate of increase of technology. There is a possibility that we're going to be able to cause humans to live so long that we're going to have something like power over death. But I'm just saying that if it ever gets to the point that death isn't this really big deal, but the world that we live in today, we do need a god of power over death because we're clueless as to what happens on the other side. As far as we know today, as humans, death is an ultimate thing. It's this really powerful thing because we lose everybody to it. We don't know what's on the other side. We're really confused. And so as a result, we have to read a lot of power into death because of we're death's bitch. We lose everybody to death. We have no cure for it. We can't figure it out at all. So of course we need a guy. We need a god of power over death in these times, in lieu of technology that hasn't developed that would allow us to control for death. Humans have no control over it. And it's just like, that's naturally going to be the result. We will create, like, since we don't know about it, there is a god who does know about it, or there has to be. It's not like we would have to make a god out of this, but it seems like naturally this is what humans do when they don't have answers. They have to come up with some description for it. And so it's just like this whole unknown area of what happens on the other side of death. We're like, well, we're just worship Jesus in the meantime. Like that doesn't seem like a bad response. Like humans are doing the best they can in a lot of areas, but maybe like humans are really narcissistic. It's like a placeholder, like we're kind of waiting for when we do have power over death, but in the meantime you have to use things like the god of power over it, otherwise you're ignoring the unknown. But it's like you have to even though this is an unknown area in life, like why are we here, what's happening in the space beyond our lifetimes here, we don't know anything about that. Like we do have to come up with, and so a lot of times something that we're describing as God is like, you're describing a future moment in time when we don't need the God of that anymore. But it's like, you're describing a future moment in time when humans figure out that they are God in this area. But my argument is that humans are already God in every area. If you have something that you're describing, the God of this, that's just a projection of something. That's a projection of something that's happening internally. Like humans have it within themselves to decide their own fates. I think that humans are God. It's just that there's a lot of areas where, like death, we don't know anything about it, and so it's really like we are made to look really human in this area, really fallible, since we don't have power over that. It's just that we're waiting for a moment in time later on where we realize ourselves to be God over this area, and then we won't have a need for like the technology of Jesus anymore. So that is what I believe at this moment in time about those things. But it's interesting that we come up with words to describe the paranormal, or come up with something to describe death where we don't know very much about it. Like, but what I'm talking about is when the paranormal infringes on the normal, we still come up with a way to describe it. Like, it's an oxymoron. The term UFO is an oxymoron because it's an unidentified flying object, but we came up with a way to identify it by calling it a UFO, by calling it an unidentified flying object. We're identifying it, and so we have a identified unidentified thing. And how could that even be possible? It's what's more interesting is just exploring the areas in life that are a coincidence, or in other words, an intersection of paranormal and normal, or real and fake, or like identified and unidentified. And so whatever we're saying UFOs is, it's kind of weird that we don't. It's like there's some things that we would make into a person, like a god, like Jesus or Santa Claus. But it's just that Santa is the god of Christmas or something, or he's like the god of gift giving. But what we don't often articulate is how Santa is a god in a similar way to anything else that we say is a god. It's just we don't ever describe it as that, but admittedly he's a god. We worship him as a god. He's like the god of Christmas or the god of gift giving, but he's a god because like adults, like, why can't adults just give gifts to their kids and say it was us who gave it to you? Why is there this whole, why do they use Santa as a middleman, where Santa receives all the blame for giving the gift? Like, if the gift was good or bad for families that are still having their kids, like if their kids still believe in Santa, if the gift was good or bad, it came from Santa. But like that is happening at all, that people are putting Santa on the gift tag to say that's who it came from. Like, why are we giving Santa credit for giving the gift when he isn't real? It seems like a cop-out, or like an excuse. Why are you blaming him? The blame is on Santa no matter what. But that's like, because we're using him as a god to receive blame in this area, where we're like, yeah, like Santa is the god of gift giving for some reason. Like, it's like for some reason people are afraid to stand behind the gift they gave, or like this is a big enough area that humans are confused enough about it. But it is kind of different to think about gift giving versus other acts of kindness. Like, I would say that gift giving among the 5 love languages is probably the most unique one. Or it's like, it's kind of indescribable. What is it that you receive with a gift, or with what you're giving with it? I mean, I'm just saying I think that one's more complex than the other, whatever, the other love languages. It's more complex than them, but maybe, but basically, Santa is a god, and for some reason he exists, is what's interesting about that, with keeping in mind whatever I've said about what we're using God for, and that God is like a technology. Then it's interesting that Santa is definitely a god, and he's a god we use to, or like, it has something to do with our inability to approach the North Pole. Maybe. Like, maybe that's why we use him. It's like at the point that we come up with technology that allows us to travel better, because we don't travel that great as a globe. Like, yeah, we've come up with planes and cars and whatever, but it's not like we're operating at maximum efficiency in uh, our ability to transport ourselves. It's not like transportation is ideal. There's so much improvement that we can make in the area of transportation. For example, we don't use the air for anything. It's ridiculous that the only time we use the air to travel is in commercial jets, and that there's just a few airlines, there's just a few companies that own the air and traveling through the air. When the air, there's so much space, it's kind of ridiculous that we don't use any of it. It really should get to the point that we develop aircraft for every individual person. But maybe it's kind of like our distance from the North Pole, and that we haven't come up with technology that allows anybody to just fly there or whatever. Maybe is what leads to us personalizing the North Pole or making it into a god, because we're unable to approach that. But rather than that, it's the case that there's something more going on at the North Pole. But I think it's very possible that there is something going on up there, as I've mentioned in previous episodes I made about the hollow earth theory. I think that, like, I'd be willing to believe things about that, just because nobody knows what's happening at the poles. But it's just kind of interesting that, what is the need for Santa Claus? Like, what's going on here? Why are we, what does it mean? What does it symbolize? What does it represent? What does Santa represent to us? Why aren't people asking these questions? Because it's like, you have the world when you're a kid and you believe in Santa, if your parents told you to believe in Santa. You have the world where you don't believe in him. But then there's the world of adults who all know that he's not real. But it's really like, even when you enter the world where you realize he isn't real, you have to, like, that's where you have to answer for why are adults treating him like he's real, or using him for their own purposes or whatever, saying that why are they using the technology of Santa? Why are they treating him like he's real? It's adults that are dressing up as Santa Claus. It's adults that write every Santa Claus song that there is in order to make money. It's adults that create theme parks that are Santa Claus themed, or they use Santa, they hide behind him in order to, they make money off of that. Like, why are adults treating this as so real? And since they are treating him like he's real, I would say that adults are treating him more like he's real than kids are. Kids aren't even doing any of the work to make him real. But it's like, this is what I'm saying. Real versus fake, you can't sort it out. I don't think you can sort it out anywhere. It's like a lot of the things we call real, you could actually say that they're fake. But it's like adults put on this whole show about Santa to make him real when they're actually faking it. But just to make him a character who poses as real. And really, that's the way that it works with with authority every single time, is that authority, like the imposition that you believe, or the posing that you believe that's putting on by an authority, is always, it's always not actually real. Like, policemen are just kind of a secret society that they've been able to convince everybody else in the world that they are always to be listened to, and as a result they get to throw whoever in jail that they want in accordance with their rules and their policies. Like, the policies put out by the secret society that is policemen, they're just like, their rules, and they're for pretend. It's not like that rule is actually there, but it is real because it's so established and everybody knows it, and everybody perceives the police to have power to throw people in jail, or like, this is the group of people that everybody perceives to be allowed to throw people in jail the most. So it's like, it is real. Police are real, but they are just people posing. Like, authority is always just an imposition, or it's always just for pretend. But so what I'm saying is that it's weird that we treat yeah, I need to set the bar lower. Getting into the territory where I'm thinking that I'm saying something important, and that's really never been the case. But I'm saying that it's adults that do all the work to make him real. So you can't tell me now that I'm an adult, like everybody knows Santa is fake. Then, like, why are adults trying to make him real all the time? And so since that is the case, I have to ask, what does this story represent? What does it mean? Santa and his elves? This is like so LSD. It has to mean something. Like, what does that represent? And since we don't have any data, but what goes hand in hand with this myth is just we have no data about the North Pole. And so it's this unknown area. So of course we create a god for, like, this is the guy who owns North Pole. And so I'd say the question is it just because we're distant from the North Pole that we create this god, or is there something more encrypted, more paranormal going on? I would argue that there is, because I think, as I've lived, if you want to hear anything about what I think or what I believe, or according to my experience, in my experience, it's always weirder than what you think it is. It's just depends on how far you're willing to look. Most people just choose to remain ignorant to it because that's way too much to go into. Like, if you want to be more conspiracy theorist, you can, and it's like the further you go into it is kind of the more that you just figure out things that you're partially right about, because there's always, like, it's just that I would say in my experience things are always weirder than what you would have thought. It is always more different. It's always stranger than what you would have thought. Where it's like the mainstream media and just common narratives, I would say across, like, corporatized religions too. Mainstream religions are going to tell you that it's simpler than you thought that it was. Like, for example, Christianity, all you have to do is make a decision to follow Christ, and it's as simple as that. The world just needs to choose Christ, and in other words, choose heaven over hell, this 1 out of 2 thing. It's very simple. Just follow Christ. But it's just like the mainstream media or a corporate religion is going to tell you that it's simple, or it's like as simple as what's right in front of your face. Like, go with what's obvious, go with what's evident, rather than go into the territory of, like, what's beyond what you see, or in other words, make assertions about what's going to happen in the future or the past. Like, the idea of living in the moment is so bullshit, because live in the present moment is just a ploy for people to only accept what's right in front of their face, when it's like, you should actually, since we've come up with words for the past and the future, like, we as humans are smart enough and progressive enough that we understand things about what came before and came after us, like, don't underutilize those words, those tools, those technologies, and say, oh, it's only the present. Like, the reason that we've evolved as humans at all is to get off of the idea that it's only the present moment. It's the past, the present, and the future, and you need to take into account all of those. Don't say that your past doesn't mean anything, or put your past behind you. Accept your past so you can leave it behind you. It will always be all 3 of those, and I'd say that you maximize. It's a better perspective to include all 3 as long as you can. Don't leave any one of them on the table when you have the ability to see things from the perspective of the past, the present, and the future. Since we know all of them are there, don't be like, it's not about the past or it's not about the future. It's completely about all of them. Don't ignore that your life is about... But I'm saying, like, it's about a lot more than what's obvious. It's about what goes beyond your field of vision and what exists in the periphery, and then beyond that. And the mainstream media is going to tell you you're an idiot for being a conspiracy theorist or trying to make an assertion beyond what's right in front of your face, because they don't want you to act intelligently. They want you to be stupid and keep watching TV. And But what I wanted to mention was how Aubrey Plaza is a genius. She maybe is one of the best. Man, I wish I would have said this at the beginning because it would have been interesting. Maybe I'll just reference it at the beginning of the next episode. Whatever. I'm just always thinking everybody tuned out by this point, but like Aubrey Plaza is sort of a genius because she came up with a. So what am I saying about Santa Claus? Here, let me finish the point. Aubrey Plaza wrote a book. She co-wrote a book with somebody called The Legend of the Christmas Witch, and this is a book that she wrote in the last couple of years. And The Legend of the Christmas Witch is about a witch that like lives at the South Pole, but is the twin brother of Santa. But she wrote this story. She made a work of art that that details a legend for Antarctica, the South Pole, where nobody's done that before, or nobody's trying to stand behind, like, have authority or ownership over a myth about the South Pole. It's only ever about Santa Claus and the North Pole. But like Aubrey Plaza, she made this Legend of the Christmas Witch. She also appears as a witch in public and is known to dress up as a witch every Christmas or something. But it's like, this point is so good that I'm just going to tell you about it at the beginning of the next episode, because I don't want people to miss it. So you have to tune in at the beginning of the next episode. Yeah, but basically, I have to ask, what does Santa represent, as long as this myth is so important to us? And I would argue that there's something hidden. It's just elves is a weird thing to include in it also. Now my anti-sermon is anticlimactic because I'm pretty much just saying how Aubrey Plaza made this book, and she's trying to create a new legend in real time right in front of our faces, and we're watching it happen. If you're willing to look in her direction and see what she's doing, like, what she's doing is so interesting. It could possibly make her one of the greatest artists of my generation, because she's trying to set herself up to be the creator of the South Pole myth. And why wouldn't that gain traction? We actually need a myth for the South Pole. We actually need a technology like that. We need a god of the South Pole. And Aubrey Plaza is so smart that she sees this, and she creates like a way for people to see her as like the creator of this legend, where it's like she's setting herself up to be believed to be the god of the South Pole, because she also like dresses up like a witch in real life to gain authority as that. She appears as that for real, and that's like real life witchcraft, if anybody is willing to be honest about that. The kind of things that people get afraid of with witchcraft and Satanism is that like these Satanists are doing it right out in the open. They're doing like Illuminati symbols or whatever, symbols over their eyes. They're doing, like, Satanists have to prove themselves out in the open, and that's why they don't just try to hide it from people. But this is like real witchcraft. Aubrey Plaza appeared on Ellen and she's dressed as a witch, but it's like nobody else is doing that because we assume witches to be so distant from us. But it's like at some point we actually have to process our relationship to mythological things like this, like a witch, and it's actually humans as a whole are able to approach it more if people are willing to do something like dress up as a witch in public and then give no explanation for it, which is what Aubrey Plaza did. But she's doing it in support of like creating herself to be a witch in real life. Like, she's, for the first time ever, somebody is like trying to make witches more mainstream, or like appearing as them, making them to appear for real. Like, Whereas like we're always afraid of these kinds of things throughout the centuries, but it's like it's crazy that she is doing that. It makes her. It's like a really artistic thing to do, but so that's interesting. But thanks for listening. Oh, I got through 9 holes. Great. Talk to you all when the next episode comes out. Bye for now.